That castle over there looks so beautiful. So I thought I should film at least one reading vlog clip here at Walt Disney World because we've been having a lot of fun on our August trip. I'm sure you guys will have already seen some of the Disney vlogs. I have lots of them to edit once we get back home. But one book that I thought it would be fun to read is this one, Nanea, The Spirit of Aloha. This is an American Girl book, and in fact, Nanea is here with me. I know I've shown some American Girl dolls in my videos. I've always loved collecting them since I was very little. My mom also loves them, and we had this trip with the Polynesian, so we thought we have to bring Nanea along. And I do have, in fact, this is my attempt at a Nanea inspired outfit. One thing I learned when I was putting together my Nanea outfit is that this, I think, is a tea timer shirt that Nanea has. It's like the women's version of a Hawaiian shirt. And I was thinking of ordering one, but all the ones I could find online were very expensive. There are some like kind of full tea timer outfits that are like retro and fabulous. So I feel like someday I'd love to go to Hawaii and I will get myself a really proper tea timer, adorable retro ensemble. So I thought we'd sit here on Sunset Point and read her book. I always loved reading the books. I love how the historical characters have these amazing backstories and like their whole family you get to meet in the book. Look at this! In the book, Nanea's hula lesson, they play lovely hula hands, which is one of the songs they play here. Yeah, this takes place right before, I think right during Pearl Harbor, because all the American Girl books take place, you know, kind of during significant times in history. Wow, look at how fun this is. There's a liner departing Honolulu Harbor, where the lighthouse is called Aloha Tower, and people would throw their leis into the ocean, and if it made it to shore, you would return to the island someday. That's so sweet. I think they need guava bread at the Polynesian. I've never heard of that before, but it sounds delicious. Well, I definitely heard a splash earlier, but I don't know if it was a frog or a fish. I don't know if there are, in fact, any fish in this pond. Well, friends, we are back from Florida. We had a really lovely time. I thought I'd fill you in on some of the things that I was reading during the trip. I always feel so sort of conflicted towards the end of a trip because, you know, getting ready for a trip is so exciting and you look forward to it, and like the first days of the trip are just always the best because you have the whole thing in front of you. And I feel like by the end of the trip, you know, you're a little tired. It's like part of you can't wait to get back home and get back to normal life. And the other part of you is just like, oh, I don't want to leave. Like when I leave, I won't be able to hear the sound of the Seven Seas Lagoon, the boat whistle echoing over the water. I won't have all this delicious food right at hand. So yes, I miss Disney, but I was also looking forward to being back in my own space. It was so nice to check up on my flowers. Anyway, to get to the books, I thought I would have Nanea here since she was with us at the Polynesian, because I did finish her book, Nanea, The Spirit of Aloha. I don't know if any of you guys have been around that long, but way back in the day, I used to enjoy bringing American Girl dolls to Disney. It's been a long time since I last brought a doll with me, but Nanea was just perfect for the Polynesian, and it was really fun to read her story there. One of the things I love most about American Girl dolls is that they each have such a well thought out story behind them, and it ties into history. Each of the American Girl doll characters are, you know, confronted by the challenges of the time that they live in, but like you also just get such a lovely picture of their home life and like the atmosphere of, in this case, Hawaii, the place, the part of the country they lived in. I think that's what makes them really special. They're not just dolls with a bunch of pretty accessories. Most of the accessories are actually right out of the book, and the dresses that they wear, you know, are mentioned in the book. So everything that goes with the doll is part of the story. So it was fun getting to know Nanea's story. This does take place right during Pearl Harbor. Nanea's father is like a kind of mechanic, a worker at Pearl Harbor, so they're very worried about him. Everyone is okay though. The American Girl doll books, I feel like, are a great way to introduce, you know, little girls, young readers to these kind of big historical events. Nanea has two close friends. One is Japanese and one is from the mainland. She's from California. And they're called the Kittens because they like love to do everything together, the three of them. I always love at the beginning of the American Girl books, there's like a little map of all the characters. And Nanea, of course, performs at a luau. Look, there she is in the dress. So that was really fun. Also during the trip, completely different. I finished reading the introduction to Dorothy Sayers' translation of Dante's Inferno. I read most of the cantos last month, and then I finished it up this month, and I wanted to go back and read the introduction because I love how Dorothy Sayers loves Dante so much, and her love and appreciation for his writing really come across beautifully in the cantos, in the translation itself, but in the introduction, like, it's so cool, the little details that she shares. Apparently, Dante, towards the end of his life, he was like finishing up the Divine Comedy. He had a few more cantos in Paradiso, which is the third volume of the Divine Comedy, and he hadn't published them yet when he passed away. And no one was sure where he left the manuscript, which in those days, it's not like you had it backed up on a hard drive. And his sons were planning to, you know, finish up the last few cantos for him. But there's this great story. Dorothy says, though it may be pure legend, it has a charm of its own, suggesting as it does that even after death, Dante was still Dante and felt a certain concern for his comedy as he waited on Tiber's shore for the angel pilot to come and ferry him across the world to Mount Purgatory. And the story goes that Dante's son had a dream where he was like directed to this one like corner of the house where Dante had died. And like this was months, years, a while after Dante's death. But the son went back to the house, went to that corner. I don't know if it was behind a painting, but he found this little cubby, and in it were the last cantos of the Paradiso. We may or may not believe that Dante was in fact made uneasy, even in the true life, by the thought of what his offspring might make of the last three heavens. It would be like him, for, as he once remarked, he trusted himself more than another. But the dream is not in itself incredible, and the details seem plausible. I love that. Dorothy Sayers is like, well, you know, it might have been like that. The introduction is really nice too, because Dorothy Sayers is obviously trying to tell you about, you know, what it's like to read in the original Italian. And she's saying like there are some passages that are so beautiful that like all she can do is kind of hint at the beauty and basically say, you need to learn Italian so you can read this for yourself. But she talks about how, especially when Dante talks about himself in the Divine Comedy, there's a sort of self-mockery in his tone that she's like tried to reproduce. The pervading flavor of Dante's humor is much more subtle. It is dry and delicate and satirical. In particular, his portrait of himself is tinged throughout with a charming self-mockery, which has no parallel that I know of outside the pages of Jane Austen. I liked that. So yes, Finished up the Inferno. I am still planning to do a review of it with my brothers. Athos has not quite finished it yet. Porthos, like, burned right through it, pun intended. So I have to bug Athos to get through the last few cantos so we can all do a little kind of group chat about the Inferno. And of course, I have Dorothy Sayers' translation of Purgatorio ready to go. I was saying last month that I was really looking forward to getting into Purgatorio because, you know, the Inferno, it's about all of the people suffering in hell and their sins. And it's meant to make you think of your own sins and your own failings. And obviously those are kind of the bad examples gone wrong, but I was really looking forward to some good examples of going right and, you know, working towards God that I'm sure Purgatorio and Paradiso will be full of. Dorothy Sayers emphasizes that, like, you can't just stop after Inferno. Like, Purgatory and especially Paradiso, the final one, are really like the whole point of the Divine Comedy. So you definitely cannot just stop after Inferno. I also read an Eva Ibbotson on my Kindle. I read a whole bunch of Eva Ibbotsons last year and they were just all so delightful. This one seemed appropriate. It was a song for summer and I did like it. I don't think I liked it quite as much as some of the ones I read in the past. Which one? The Secret Countess. That, you know, that was one of the first ones I read, and I think it's still probably my favorite. These are adult novels. Their characters are so warm, so well drawn, so quirky and relatable, even though in this one, this is one of the kind of themes of her books, actually. There's a school for children, and it's like a very unconventional school, like, you know, don't want to impose too much on the kids, and like the teachers have all these crazy ideologies, but she makes them likable and like shows the heart behind them in spite of their ideologies. And in this story, the heroine actually, she's British. This is also typical of Eva Ibbotson. I feel like her stories always kind of cross lines between Great Britain and Austria. In this one, the heroine loves to cook and she like studies cooking and then she goes and gets a job at this children's school in Austria, out like in the Alps, or you know, maybe it's in Switzerland actually. But like the descriptions of the mountains and the landscape are so beautiful. And the heroine, as always, just like appreciates everything so much and like brings so much life and joy. But like she's also very self-effacing, like she works really hard. And so she becomes a really important part of this school. This book takes place right on the eve, on the cusp of World War II. And that is a major theme. The hero is very involved with that because he is, you know, his heart is kind of breaking for his homeland, which is being overrun by the Nazis, and he's doing what he can. But there's also a lot about joy even in the face of this growing shadow. And in the end, the school ends up, I don't know if this is a spoiler or not. Spoiler warning, if you care about spoilers, skip ahead. But the school ends up helping the local village to celebrate their patron saint. Because the village is Catholic, and of course the school people are mostly like agnostic or atheist. But like they come together with the village, and whatever they want to call it, they're celebrating God's beauty and the kind of miracle of God's world. Here's one quotation I liked. "Candles are candles. They are not confined to countries or religions. Their living flame reaches upwards to places where disputation has long since ceased." As usual with Eva Ibbotson, there were so many lovely quotations and just beautiful descriptions and really insightful descriptions. I liked this one. "Ellen's thoughts always wandered in church, but they wandered well." At one point, they mentioned something called the Heiligenstadt Testament. Music is a huge theme in this. The hero is a composer. But that apparently is a famous work by Beethoven, and I had never heard of it previously, so I'm definitely going to need to look that up and read that at some point. I really should get out my quotation journal and try to write in it during August and keep it up to date because I just recently got it filled in from all the months that I had fallen behind. There are also lots of fun Tolkien quotes that I've come across this month. I read The Two Towers. It was actually really fun because it was my car book. Definitely made the drive go by very quickly. Actually, a while ago, a year and a half ago or so, I had started the Fellowship of the Ring on Frodo and Bilbo's birthday in September. And I had wanted to read it like chronologically because it starts in September and then it ends kind of around February, March, I think. And then The Two Towers and Return of the King all kind of take place February, March, except for the Return of the King, which then kind of wraps things up and extends long into the future. But most of that action is kind of contained in a space of a couple months, and it's been on my list to pick it back up and get through this this reread of The Lord of the Rings. After I'm finished with it, I would love to reread The Silmarillion, because I've only read that once, and I would love to be more familiar with it. But yes, The Lord of the Rings is just such a great immersive world, and the language is so sort of, you know, high-flown and inspiring, and you have these elves and wizards and hobbits. "Now, Theoden, son of Thengel, will you hearken to me?" said Gandalf. "Do you ask for help?" He lifted his staff and pointed to a high window. There the darkness seemed to clear, and through the opening could be seen high and far a patch of shining sky. "Not all is dark. Take courage, Lord of the Mark, for better help you will not find. No counsel have I to give to those that despair, yet counsel I could give, and words I could speak to you. Will you hear them? They are not for all ears. I bid you come out before your doors and look abroad. Too long have you sat in shadows and trusted to twisted tales and crooked promptings." Obviously, there's a lot of growing darkness and a huge threat for Mordor to be faced in Lord of the Rings, but there's also a wonderful kind of sense of hope and sense of perseverance that underlies all of it. This reread, I noticed a lot more of the lore that stretches back ages and ages before the action of the book. And of course, that's the Silmarillion, is kind of the age-old history of Middle-earth. And it's so fun how it's just touched on the surface in this, but Tolkien wrote so much, you know, and obviously completely kind of painted out the history of Middle-earth. I actually have already started Return of the King, and it's been really fun to go through that. I can't believe how quickly we are going through August already. As with the end of my Disney trip, I kind of feel the same way about the end of summer. It's like you don't want to see summer go, but at the same time, I am kind of excited for fall. I'm so excited to see the leaves change color. It'll be nice to have cooler weather and to get into all the lovely cozy fall things. Yes, we do still have a couple weeks left of summer, so I'll have to see what other summer reads I can squeeze in. I match my sunflowers today. I found this dress on Amazon. It's so cute, isn't it? I'm just giving everybody a quick drink. I'm so pleased with how my sunflowers have come up. The little dwarf sunflowers down there. I think this one is an Italian white because I did some that were just kind of the more normal yellowy ones, but then I did some Italian whites. I also did some ruby eclipses, but unfortunately I don't see any of them. So we'll have to see if the ruby eclipse puts in an appearance. This one sadly has faded. This was my biggest sunflower, but I read online that if you want to get seeds, you should just leave it on the stalk, and that it will then give you some seeds, so I can plant more sunflowers next year. Although I might see, it said, this was what the online sunflower advice was, for whatever it was worth. It said that if you have other sunflowers on the stalk, which some of these guys have some sunflowers on the lower branches, that you could cut off any wilted sunflowers, and then that will help the new ones to grow. Yes, just giving everybody a quick drink. It's so nice and sunny, this spot, but it does dry out quite a bit, so I try to give everyone frequent drinks in the hot summer weather. There are always bumblebees. There's one right now. They obviously like my sunflowers, which bumblebees I'm fine with. Wasps, not so much. new pot of tea, and I thought it'd be nice to have a little Shakespeare chat. I could fill you in on how I've been doing with my Shakespeare project. I've been trying to read one play a month throughout 2021, to read the plays, a lot of the lesser known ones that I'm not very familiar with. I had been reading the Henriade, so I started with Richard II, and then Henry IV Part 1 and Henry IV Part 2, and I had been thinking of going on to Henry V, but since the purpose of this year-long Shakespeare read was to look more closely at the ones I don't know very well, I do know Henry V fairly well. I've seen it performed. I think I've read it. Also, I was feeling like I kind of needed a break from the Henrys. There are 3 more, Henry VI, Part 1, 2, and 3. So I thought I would catch my breath a bit with another play. I started Cymbeline this month. I'm only an act into it, but I do have some time left in the month, so hopefully I'll be able to get through it. I believe this is known as one of the problem plays because it's not really lighthearted enough to be a comedy. It's not dark enough to be a tragedy. It's not a history. Cymbeline is a king of Britain. He's actually not really the main character, though. I would say his daughter, at least so far, his daughter Imogen seems to be the main character. She went and married the man she loved against the will of her family. She has a stepmother, the queen. She also has 2 older brothers who were kind of stolen from the nursery when they were young. I have a sneaking suspicion we're going to hear more about them before the play is out. But anyway, Imogen's husband has been banished and she's basically been locked up in the palace. There was this scene, I didn't Google the plot of this beforehand, so I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen, but there was this one scene where the stepmother says, "Oh, I'm not like other bad stepmothers. Like, here, I'll support you, Imogen. Like, you know, here you can have one last conversation with your husband before he goes off to be banished." And for a minute I was like, wow, is she going to be like a good stepmother? But no, she's a bad stepmother. Later on, she's talking with her doctor, and he says, "My conscience bids me ask, wherefore you have commanded of me these most poisonous compounds, which are the movers of a languishing death, but though slow, deadly." It's like, maybe you should have asked that before you brought her the poisons. She says in reply, "I wonder, doctor, thou askest me such a question. Have I not been thy pupil long? Hast thou not learned me how to make perfumes, distill, preserve? Yea, so that our great king himself doth woo me oft for my confections. Having thus far proceeded, unless thou thinkest me devilish, is it not meet that I did amplify my judgment in other conclusions? I will try the forces of these thy compounds on such creatures as we count not worth the hanging, but none human, to try the vigor of them, and apply aliments to their act, and by them gather their several virtues and effects." And the doctor says, "Your highness shall from this practice but make hard your heart. Besides, the seeing these effects will be both noisome and infectious." And later on, the doctor reassures us, the audience, "I do not like her. She doth think she has strange lingering poisons. I do know her spirit, and will not trust one of her malice with a drug of such damned nature. Those she has will stupefy and dull the sense awhile, which first perchance she'll prove on cats and dogs, then afterward up higher. But there is no danger in what show of death it makes, more than the locking up the spirits a time, to be more fresh, reviving. She is fooled with a most false effect, and I the truer, so to be false with her." So yes, I'm sure this fake potion is also going to cause some misadventures. So Imogen's husband, who is named Posthumus, I think his father died, or his mother died when he was born, and his father died shortly after. It's a fairly unique name. But anyway, he's banished, and he kind of falls in with this crowd of guys in Italy. I think Rome is where he goes. And instantly, they get into this argument, and Posthumus is saying that his wife, Imogen, is, you know, fairer and more virtuous and better than any other woman in the world. And Iachimo, I'm not sure how you pronounce this, but this jerk is basically like, "Oh yeah, I will go and woo her and prove that she will be false to you." And Posthumus stupidly agrees to this. "My mistress exceeds in goodness the hugeness of your unworthy thinking." Even earlier in the play, people seem to hold Imogen in very good regard when they're describing her husband. "Her own price proclaims how she esteemed him in his virtue. By her election may be truly read what kind of man he is. She shines not upon fools, dimples, lest the reflection should hurt her. So far, Iachimo has arrived and is trying to woo Imogen, but she seems to see through him and cuts him short pretty quickly, but we're only one act in, so I have a feeling things are going to get more tangled, as they usually do in Shakespeare. I do still have a week or so left of August, so I think I should be able to finish Cymbeline, and then let's see, I need to put aside 3 months for the Henrys. I think those I'll probably do October, November, December. And then I think for September, I will read... This was kind of one of those impulse buys when I was out bookstore browsing. I was like, well, I'm trying to read these Shakespeares. I should just get it for my shelf. I think The Two Noble Kinsmen is one that Shakespeare and John Fletcher. So he wrote it with somebody else. And I think I read that Pericles, which I read earlier this year, was another one he supposedly wrote with somebody else. And I did not really like Pericles. It felt kind of disjointed. So it'll be interesting to see how The Two Noble Kinsmen is. Although I am getting ahead of myself, I should first just settle in and finish up Cymbeline. One way in which my farmhouse is far superior to Disney is that it has its own hammock. We went to Disney in early 2020 before the pandemic, and the hammocks were back at the Polynesian. I was so excited. But of course, sadly, they have been taken away, presumably because of COVID, although like there are still Adirondack chairs and like the swinging benches out on the beach. So it's like, why did you only take away the hammocks? Some of you guys had already warned me earlier this year that the hammocks were gone, but that just makes me savor my own lovely hammock all the more. One of my hammock reads this month has been The Rosemary Tree by Elizabeth Goudge. I thought of bringing this on the trip, but even when you're just reading it around home, I feel like it's so easy to mess up paperbacks. And when you take it on a trip, like it's even more difficult. I love these hotter books, Elizabeth Goudge's, but I always try to take care of them when I read them because I want them to stay in good shape. You guys know how much I love Elizabeth Goudge, but this is actually my first time reading The Rosemary Tree. I just hadn't happened to have gotten to this yet. The synopsis on the back says, Michael Stone was once a famous author. That was before he went to prison. Now, recently released, Michael needs a new beginning. Weighed down by failure and despair, the town of Silverbridge seems to offer him a quiet rural escape from the past. Kind, gentle vicar John Wentworth takes Michael under his wing and introduces him to his family and friends. I have really been enjoying it. One of the things I love most about Elizabeth Goudge is her, insights into the characters and into their spiritual lives. She has such a magical way of describing ordinary things. Here, one of the characters is musing on a kind of rainy day. She liked these gray days. They had their own beauty. When the sun was out, the world was a young knight riding out with armor flashing and pennon flying. But on a day like this, it was an old beadsman turned to his prayers, wrapped in a dun cloak of stillness and silence. All of the characters kind of create their own worlds and like reflect on the worlds that they create. I like how she writes about prayer too and kind of weaves prayer into her stories, and I feel like sometimes you almost get to see the results of a character's prayer. Like, they're thinking of someone or this thought pops into their head, and it's almost like then when you move to the perspective of another character, they finish that thought, or they like feel the strength that the other character was trying to, send in their direction through their prayer. Although, ironically, there's actually a passage about prayer here, which is showing how even though prayer is powerful and prayer can do those things, you're not the one who really gets to choose how the prayer manifests itself and where the prayer really goes. This is about John Wentworth, the vicar. He thought to himself now that it did not much matter in itself what one did. It was chiefly as the vehicle of love or the symbol of prayer that action was important. That kind of reminds me of what I was reading in the Bhagavad Gita last month. Or did he only think that because in action he was himself generally such a bungler? Perhaps if he faced the truth, he would find that one of the reasons why he spent so much time in prayer was because the results of prayer were unknown and one could indulge in the sin of wishful thinking. For it most certainly was a sin for a man to sit back picturing the pleasing results of his prayer. Unless prayer was bread cast upon the waters in blind faith, without hope or desire for knowledge or reward, then it was nothing more than selfish and dangerous indulgence of fantasy. It is difficult, he thought, for a human being to face the fact that he is really quite superfluous. He's always trying to find a loophole somewhere. I think Googe always does a great job of giving you kind of both sides of the picture, like not letting you off the hook, not letting you go too far into the fantasy realm, because she talks about, pain and suffering and the hard truth. And the hard truths of life, too. So in part of the story, we get to know John Wentworth's 3 young daughters and the school that they go to. And at one point, one of the teachers, the most likable teacher, was out in the garden with her students, and they're just enjoying the day, and she forgets to give them their lesson. And she's reflecting on how the birds overhead, there was a good deal to be said for the sparrows. They did at least persevere in passing those remarks, to which it appeared to be their vocation to give utterance. What a neat way to describe the birds, that it's their vocation to give utterance to their songs, and they single-mindedly do it while the teacher forgot about her job for that afternoon. And then a couple pages later, Googe kind of picks up this thought again. There was a happy chirping in the cloakroom as the children put on their walking shoes. Mary, standing at the door, thought they might have been sparrows, so loud was the chirping and so fulfilled with satisfaction. Perhaps the purpose of sparrows, as of children let out of school, was just to remark loudly and with repetition that in spite of any appearance to the contrary, everything is quite all right. If the repetition seemed a little monotonous at times, that was one's own fault. In a world where thrushes sing and willow trees are golden in the spring, boredom should have been included among the 7 deadly sins. So I do have to acknowledge that one of the drawbacks of Googe's writing is that it can be very dense, because she is going into this interior world and talking about the kind of spiritual life of her characters. Usually, though, I feel like there's enough of a plot, there's enough action to draw you on that, it kind of keeps you interested. And so there's a good balance between the spiritual insights and just between, the story. In the Rosemary Tree so far, I'm about 100 or so pages in, and it feels like it's missing its usual plot. It feels like not much has happened. And I am still enjoying it. The writing is still beautiful and there's still a lot in it, but I just kind of wish, the action was moving. There are so many descriptive passages, of the scenery, and they're just a little too meticulously drawn. She seems to describe every single plant in this garden and where it's located, and then she describes every single thing in the dining room and literally what type of china each china dish was, and they're all different types of china. And if those things were a little more spaced out with more action, I think I would be enjoying it more, but it has been a little bit slow going. I'm interested to see if will there ever be a plot? The one plant which did not survive my vacation very well was my poor mango lantana. If you guys watched my earlier reading vlogs, you know how beautiful this was, and it had really pretty pink and yellow flowers. It said online that it was drought resistant, and I got back and it just looked deader than dead. It looked like I left it for months. However, there was still some green, so I've been watering it, and look at this. Look at all these new little leaves. So it seems like maybe it might come back. So this I did not plant. It was kind of just a weed, but it had these pretty flowers that turn into these little green, they almost look like mini pumpkins. And then look at this. Are these blueberries? Obviously, I'm not going to to attempt eating them or anything like that. But I love the flowers. Aren't they so pretty? The way the stem is pink. My mom gave me these two little vines, which this one, she's had flowers on her. This is a type of morning glory. It has outgrown its circle and is kind of, sort of, not really, snaking up around the pillar. So hopefully these little blossoms will come into bloom. I think my mom's were red. It's hard to tell what color they are right now, but this vine, I didn't even notice a blossom on it. And then I came out today and just, here's that pretty yellow flower. It's such an interesting shape, isn't it? And with like that black as night inside. I was hoping my beans would wrap around this pillar, but look at this. They've like wrapped around themselves a million times and just absolutely refused, no matter how many times. I guess I just need a better technique. They refused to go up. I cannot remember what flower seeds these were. They have not yet flowered, but they look pretty green and healthy. They're sharing the bucket with a few beans that I planted in there. So here are the quotations I decided to go with for my August quotation page. This one is from A Song for Summer by Eva Ibbotson. If you feel the need to write music or play it, then do so. But believe me, your creativity is of no interest to anyone. Write something, then it's there. If it's what you wanted to write, if it exists, then leave it. If it doesn't, throw it away. Your beautiful state of mind is totally irrelevant. The process of creativity and what it means to be a person who creates, whether it's music or art or writing, I think is always a theme in Eva Ibbotson's works, and was definitely one in A Song for Summer. You know, I realized that I could page back through my quotation journal and see exactly when I left off in The Two Towers. It was March 2020, and I had read up through the chapter in Fanghorn with the Ents. So I decided for this quotation from The Two Towers, I went with a line about Lothlorien and Galadriel, even though they're not in The Two Towers, because that part took place during the Fellowship of the Ring. I feel like they're referenced a lot. Sam says this about Galadriel. It strikes me that folks take their peril with them into Lorien, and finds it there because they've brought it, but perhaps you could call her perilous, because she's so strong in herself. You could dash yourself to pieces on her like a ship on a rock, or drowned like a hobbit in a river, but neither rock nor river would be to blame. And then I picked out two quotations from Elizabeth Goudge from the Rosemary Tree. One was apt to forget that an increase in power upon the one side meant a corresponding increase of power upon the other. What waves of light there must be washing against all the dirty walls of all dark strongholds. What power, gentle, inexorable, and undefeatable. An ocean of power and patience. If it was hard to abide its time, it should not be hard to trust its power. And then, as one lived in a place, certain things about one, the branches of a tree seen through one's window, certain aspects of the light, a church tower in the distance perhaps, or an old horse browsing in a green field, moved forward from the rest of one's surroundings and became the furniture of one's own private world. So I thought I would go through my shelves and pick out some books for my fall TBR, since it's getting to be that time of the year. Obviously, I'm going to finish The Rosemary Tree. I kind of like when I'm not reading it, I put it back in its spot, because then I know it's going to stay nice. But that definitely I want to finish. I would love to read Rilla of Ingleside, and then I will have broken in all of my beautiful Anne of Green Gables books. And I don't think I've read this one before. I've been reading the sequels for the first time. Also, not on those shelves. On this shelf, I want to reread The Analects of Confucius. I reread the Bhagavad Gita earlier this year, inspired by Thoreau, reading Walden. He loves to quote Confucius and the Bhagavad Gita, so I think it'd be really fun to reread that. Let's see. Here's my beautiful August calendar girl. Isn't she sweet? I feel like that's perfect because I went to Disney this month. Probably going to be breaking in The Two Noble Kinsmen, as we mentioned. And you know what? Actually, this is another book I need to break in. I finally ordered this. I'm sure I've read this in the past. This is written by the nephew of Jane Austen during the Victorian era when she was, gaining popularity. People wanted to know more about her, so he wrote this book of family recollections. I thought it'd be nice to have a copy of it, so it'd be fun to revisit that. I have Purgatorio here, definitely hoping to make some progress in that. Hopefully I'll finish the whole Divine Comedy by the end of this year. I also would like to read at least one more sequel of Dune this year. Be nice to get that. And then down here, I think this is the last Penguin English Library paperback I will allow myself to buy for quite some while because there's no more room on this shelf. But I did grab Brideshead Revisited recently. I think I've read this before. I am familiar with the story, but I don't remember it very well, so I think it'd be fun. Stack is already growing and growing. Although fall is like September and October, so I bet I'll be able to get through it. I almost forgot, I do want to finish Return of the King, which is not here because it's out. I've been reading it. Should I reread The Hobbit too? I feel like I never read these books in order. I always end up reading them separately, like with, months or years in between, which obviously they do go together, but they were written separately. But at some point it would be fun to reread The Hobbit. Tolkien generally is so fun for fall, and I feel like these books especially just look and feel so fallish. They're like the perfect kind of fall leaf colors. Before I forget to mention it, if you have enjoyed my Boo to You readathon in years past, which usually runs in the month of October, then make sure you stay tuned because I'll have an announcement about that very soon. October 1st is the 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World. So it feels like this October has to have a Boo to You readathon. I think this is the fourth one in a row. Maybe we'll have to do some kind of fun read along on my Discord for that. It was really fun reading Pride and Prejudice on Discord. Actually, we're gonna do a watch along of the 1940 Pride and Prejudice, which has Laurence Olivier and Greer Garson. It's so different. They're wearing like Civil War era hoop skirts, but it's also so fabulous. Anyway, we queue it up and press play, and then we chat about it in the chat box as we watch. We're gonna do that on Thursday, September 2nd at 8 p.m. So if you haven't yet, you can send me an email, emma@bookishprincess.com, or a DM on Instagram, and I'll send you the link to join the Discord. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this August reading vlog. If you're not yet, obviously do all the good things. Make sure you're subscribed, give this video a thumbs up. I'll talk to you again soon, and until then, I hope you have a magical and a bookish day. Bye, guys.